Welcome to Out the Park 26 video where we're going to talk about MLB realignment. I've got a realignment idea today that I think you're all just going to hate. So I'm excited to tell you about it. If you remember, I think it was sometime this summer, and I'm saying this summer, this is being recorded in October 2025. So in the summer of 2025, there was The Athletic had an article about realignment and expansion. Thank you to some of you who pointed out the John Boy video to me on expansion. I thought that was a great expansion idea, and there are lots of good ideas out there. And so I kind of started thinking about the different scenarios, and I gave myself some rules for this particular realignment idea. The A's are going to be back in Oakland, and I expanded to 32 teams. And because the A's are in Oakland, one of the expansion teams had to be Las Vegas. But then there are also a couple criteria that I gave myself that really boxed me into some ideas that I think everyone's going to dislike. I think you guys are going to dislike this idea. It was just kind of like an interesting thought exercise. So I divided the league into 8 divisions of 4 in the AL, 4 in the NL. And if you've watched my channel at all, you know that you may know that I generally think fewer divisions is better. I've even done a sim where the AL was 115 team division and the NL was 115 team division. Nevertheless, here I went with 8 divisions because even though it kind of makes me, my stomach queasy to have 8 divisions, well, that's kind of why I did it, because let me box myself into an idea that is kind of different than anything I normally do. I wanted to look at a realignment idea that runs counter to the ones I'd normally consider best, I guess you could say. And to make it even more wild, I divided the AL and NL generally east and west, with a minor exception or two. And by that I mean the 16 easternmost teams are in the AL and the 16 westernmost teams are in the NL. I made some quick exceptions, some minor exceptions in the Midwest, which you'll see here in a second when I show you the divisions. I think the only fudging I did was the Brewers in the AL, but the 2 Chicago teams are in the NL, and Milwaukee is slightly further west, I believe, than Chicago by just a little bit. And so this East-West concept, as well as only 4 teams in each division, really just guarantees people, there are going to be certain people that really hate this idea, because you won't be able to accommodate every current rivalry. At least 1 or 2 divisions is going to be you're going to look at it and be what is this division, right? But that's just kind of inherent in this setup, and honestly kind of what made these parameters fun to work within. And I'm going to stop blabbering here in a second and show you the divisions, but just one more thing before I show you the divisions. If you've watched this channel before, you know that every fall I participate in a fundraiser to raise money for Parkinson's research. My mom has Parkinson's, and every year I raise money for an event she organizes. There's a link in the description of this video. If you're able to donate, just click on it and donate. I fully understand not everyone has the means to donate. There's only so many causes each of us can support. But even if half the people watching this video donated $5, I'd surpass my fundraising goal. So any donation helps. $1, $5, $10, whatever. Honestly would mean a ton to me. It's a cause that means a lot to me, to support a person who means the world to me, my mom. So if you're able to donate, I'd appreciate it. Link is in the description. Thanks for listening. Let's look at these divisions. Are you ready? You're going to hate this. Oh, and I also want to say, I simmed to the 2026 off season. So that's where we're at. And don't pay attention to the records and all the who made the postseason. That's by the old realignment. So, all right, let's jump right in. Okay. So AL East, where we've grouped 4 big markets. I think probably of these 4 teams, I don't know who's going to hate it more, Jays fans or Mets fans. Probably Jays fans. But, when you put an O's fan like myself in charge of realignment, the Jays get what they deserve for throwing a beer at Hyun-Soo Kim in 2016 in the postseason. They get what they deserve for Cito Gaston not putting Mike Mussina when he was an O's pitcher in the 1993 All-Star game in Baltimore. Could you imagine if that happened now in the age of social media or whatever this age is that we're in, of always being connected to everything and everybody having opinions about everything? Man, Cito Gaston, the Toronto Blue Jays manager in 1993, the MLB All-Star game was in Baltimore, and Mike Mussina as a nose pitcher, made the All-Star team, and he wasn't put in the game. So anyways, back to this division. I think this division would pretty easily have the highest combined payroll in baseball every season. It's totally fair that Mets fans would hate losing all their old divisional rivals, but I wanted the two New York teams together, and I think the Mets would find pretty easy natural rivalries with the Yankees and Red Sox, and I think the Blue Jays eventually too. Next, you'll see the NL Midwest division. The Brewers get to come back over to the AL to renew some old rivalries. The Guardians and Tigers stay together to keep their, strong dislike of each other going. As somebody who lives with the Tigers fan, I am reminded that this, Cleveland, Detroit, they don't like each other really. And the Reds may stick out here as kind of an odd choice, but I really think there's some natural regional rivalries that would form here, especially with the fellow Ohio team in Cleveland. So again, there's some things that are going to, especially with this East-West alignment, they're going to be like, wait, what? But that was my thinking in putting Cincinnati here. The AL South, it might be the most boring division. Braves fans would probably hate this division most. Like from a current rivalry standpoint, it's just, the Braves kind of get wrecked here. But, they would probably outspend all their divisional rivals by a wide margin. It would give them a healthy advantage. I think this would be one of the, at least in the current MLB, this would be maybe the easiest division. And maybe there's a natural rivalry with Charlotte eventually, right? The Charlotte Wreckers, which we expanded to Charlotte and Las Vegas. So the Florida teams were obviously going to be together. And given that the Texas teams were going to be in the NL because of the East-West, there's really no other fit for Tampa and Miami than this division. Sorry, my sniffles got a cold, and it's like I can't stop. The AL Mid-Atlantic, here we go, represents Maryland, D.C., Pennsylvania. A bit of a stretch, I'd say, to call the Pirates a Mid-Atlantic team, but I think this division is a natural fit for the Pirates. They have the Turnpike rivalry with the Phillies, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, and the rivalry of the World Series of the 1970s with your Baltimore Orioles. I think the O's, Nats, and Phillies all make pretty natural rivals here. I think there'd be a lot of dislike between fans of this division. I think there's a lot of overlap between Orioles fans as Washington Capitals fans, and obviously there's a Flyers-Caps rivalry, so while the Phillies fans probably look at this and be like, wait, what? Like, we're not with the Mets anymore. We're not, not with a lot of their current rivals. I think that this would become a division where everybody would really dislike each other. And that's what we want. That's part of what we want, right? So let's hop over to the NL West. The NL West is fun. I debated keeping the Giants in this division and swapping out the D-backs because Giants with Dodgers and Padres just feels right. But ultimately, the geography just made more sense to have Arizona here and the Giants in the Pacific, even if it isn't like as fun from a current baseball standpoint. And I went back and forth, but it would be pretty random from a geographic sense to have the Giants in a different division to A's and Arizona with all these other Pacific teams here. So sorry about losing all your rivals, Giants fans. The Mariners with the Giants and A's is an obvious choice, and hopping down here. NL Pacific. I think it just makes sense from like a geographic standpoint. The Mariners with the Giants and A's, like I said, kind of obvious, and Las Vegas is just kind of like a natural fit, I think, based off of, geography. Also, I don't feel great, kind of like about I said with the NLS about this division for the Giants from a current rival standpoint, but I think Oakland and San Fran would form a nice rivalry here. I'd be interested to know what Mariners fans think of this division as they bring one division mate from current MLB over, but then they get the Giants and an expansion team. So I don't know that there's a different way to do this for the Mariners within the parameters I boxed myself into. The NL Central, I think it's going to make people mad, but oops, sorry, changed my word there. But I think this one's going to make people mad. I think every division is something that's going to make people mad, but this is one where I was like, oh yeah, people are going to hate this. But I wanted the Chicago teams together, just like I like having the LA teams together and the New York teams together, as well as the Bay Area teams. That's just kind of something that I stuck with. The Cards lose some of their NL Central rivals, but they stick with the Cubs, and I think that's a big one to keep together. Twins fans, I don't know, might hate this completely. I think, this was another one where there was going to be like with all the teams in what we're calling the Midwest, what we as a people call the Midwest. I think there was going to be some weird fits. There was going to be some Midwest teams that you're just like, wait, what? So this was the least weird, least bad one. I think the Twins and White Sox have a natural rivalry that will keep going. I think there's a rivalry because, the Chicago-Minnesota rivalry between the White Sox and Twins, I think could develop between the Cubs and Twins. So, and the Cardinals, just so easy to dislike as the self-proclaimed best fans in baseball that I think they'll find rivalries with anyone. When you call yourself the best fans in baseball, people are just going to naturally, whether you are or not, and whether it's accurate or not, I'm just saying people are going to naturally dislike you if you call yourself that. So I think the Cardinals will find rivals with the Twins and White Sox pretty easily. The NL Plains division, a little weird, but I think it's like, again, inherent in this exercise that there are going to be some weird fits. There, as I've said, like there's no realignment idea that's going to make total sense. But, Texas and Houston naturally go together. The Rockies are just kind of out there on their own, not many teams near them, and pairing them with the Texas teams makes at least as much sense as the other options, if not more. So I'm sure the Royals and their fans would really not like this division. They aren't with anyone from their current division. Travel for their divisional games is going to be probably the worst in the league. But one of these Midwest teams, again, like we're just going to get screwed. And Kansas City is the closest of the Midwest teams to Texas and Colorado. So again, it was just one of those like least bad choices is how Kansas City ended up here. So that's my realignment idea. A few questions if you feel like answering questions in the comments. Like overall, like what do you think of this idea, bearing in mind like the parameters I gave myself, right? Bearing in mind that I know that boxing myself in the way I did with 8 divisions and East-West alignment in AL and NL, like there were going to be some just bad choices. So what do you think given that? And then if you have the financial means, did you click on the link in the description to the video to donate? It's another question I have for you. And then I'm also thinking maybe I should record some videos where I play as a team in this format for a few seasons, pick it up with the 2027 MLB season. Let me know if you want to do that. I could go through a video where I go through some of like the teams that I would be most interesting to take over in 2027 in this alignment. Anyways, again, thank you guys for watching. Thank you for considering to donate. Let me know what you think of this terrible realignment idea. Talk to you guys next time.